acknowledge that what you have been challenging in your writing and this current piece about anti-racism is distinct from the long anti-discrimination efforts that have existed in America, perhaps from inception? Making that distinction is crucial in my view, because the reason I think it's important to make that distinction is that when you tell people that we're fighting anti-racism, most lay people are like, well, why? Why would you want to fight anti-racism? Because they think anti-racism is basically the movement to fight against racial discrimination. And what I realize is that one of the reasons they do that is they don't realize that anti-racism not only is distinct from anti-discrimination, oftentimes it has nothing to do
Right.
with anti-discrimination. Can you make that clarification of taxonomy for our audience, please?
Sure. Yeah, first of all, I want to address something in the chat. No, there's no relaxo. I just need a damn haircut. But so, I guess in the first place, I don't really talk to lay people about anti-racism, right? I mean, I talk to working people about issues that concern them on a daily basis, right? And what I found, by and large, is when I do that, like the question of where I stand about anti-racist politics, or Djene Reed or Black Lives Matter or whatever, doesn't even come up, because as you brothers both know, and I assume much if not most of your audience knows, those aren't the issues that rank and file Black people think about as they go about their daily work. I mean, like, I was on a panel just about a year ago with a brother who was running for Congress in Brooklyn, who was going on about how he didn't. I think I mentioned this in the article about he didn't accept the idea that there are class distinctions among Black Americans, because every Black American faces like a daily danger of being killed by the police. Well, that, first of all, that's not even true statistically. But
wait, he said every Black American is in danger of getting killed by the police.
Right. And that's why he said there's no such thing as class distinctions among Black people. Right? He wouldn't accept that idea. So I mean, so no, I mean, I've never been opposed to anti-discrimination politics. I think I've always made that very clear. I've never been opposed to affirmative action as a technique of more extensive anti-discrimination enforcement, right? But yeah, what's called anti-racist politics at this point is something that's entirely different, right? It's actually what Cedric and Touré referred to more recently as Black politics, as it's understood in the contemporary times. It's a class-driven project that's advanced by elites and wannabe elites who purport to speak in the interest of a generic racial constituency with which they have no direct and organic connection other than what they claim by virtue by virtue of race. And they propound an agenda that doesn't directly address the everyday felt concerns of the vast majority of Black people in this country, who either get up and go to work every day or are expected to go to work every day.
It's really interesting. One of the terms I've used to describe the discourse around this politics, particularly in the same period that you're talking about in this piece from 2015, is why I use the term racial grievance discourse. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, I wrote a piece for Black Agenda Report called The Great Awakening, which I didn't coin that phrase. I mean, I think you might have been the person who coined it, but it started somewhere else. That basically talked about how...
I think I know the jerk off who first coined it. It might have been Matt Iglesias, but
Right.
Oof.
But I wasn't thinking about him when I used it either. It just came to me.
Right. But the basic premise of the piece was how racial grievance discourse had been increased in its weaponization in the era of the late term of the Obama presidency, right around the coming 2016 election.
Right.
And I'm going to get to that in terms of the confluence of events around that later on down the line.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I really admire about the piece that you wrote here in Non-Site that we're talking about, and we're going to repeat the title again when we shared it. Let me go get my big white man, the clientelist foundations of contemporary anti-racist politics, is that you discuss a history that, as someone who's familiar with your repertoire, I've read in several of your pieces, articles, books, what have you, but I never get tired of hearing because it is so absolutely oblivious to discussion within the hallowed halls of Black studies,
Yeah.
within the hallowed halls of all of Black academia, who claim to wax rhapsodic on their specialization and knowledge of
Right.
Black political history. And that particular historical narrative that I'm talking about is the way in which race relations and the race leader or racial manager or racial broker, if you will, comes to be. And just to let you know that I tell you, jokingly, I read your stuff. Not only I read your stuff, I buy the stuff that you suggest that we read. This is The Education of Booker T. Washington, Michael Rudolph West.
Yeah.
Right here.
Book. Yeah.
Very good book.
Yep.
Very good book. And can you go into, for our audience, and you don't have to prolong it as much as you need to, but can you go into where the concept of this race leadership, race management, race relations, or I like to say racial ventriloquist paradigm comes from? I want to challenge you a little bit because I kind of think it might be even a little earlier than Booker T. And I'd like your thoughts on that.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, Booker T is like the symbolic avatar of it, right? But so look, until emancipation, and Michael West makes this argument. Until emancipation, the substance of the Negro question was really a question about slavery, right?
Mhm.
Once slavery was over, we had a 30-year period thereabouts when the Negro question wasn't really on the table anymore, or the Negro question was, if anything, more a matter of how Black free people were going to be incorporated into American life, right, into the mainstream of American life. And that's what the 14th and 15th Amendments, right, were set out to do. And also the 13th, no matter what Ava DuVernay and whoever she talks to in the crack house believes. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were all focused on navigating the incorporation of Black Americans into a post of the insurrection or a fully national citizenship that was anchored to free labor ideology. And over the course of that 30-year period, in the South, where the vast majority of the Black population was, there was like ongoing struggle, right? I mean, free people wanted to be as far away from slavery as they could get. The planter class wanted Black people to be as close to slavery as they could manage. Among other things, the sharecrop system kind of came out of that as a compromise. It was still tilted to favor the planters, of course, but at least it freed the free people from direct supervision of white overlords. And all through this period, after the ratification of the 15th Amendment, for sure, Black people were voting, holding office, right, from state level to county and town level. And for all that period, the idea of a Negro spokesman or a Negro leader just didn't exist, right? There wasn't a job description for such a person. And there didn't need to be, and moreover couldn't be, right? Because Black people were civically engaged, right, on a regular basis. So one irony is that it's only in the context of expanding disfranchisement in 1880s and 1890s that that the notion of a Negro leader began to take shape, right? Or the Negro leader as a category or a job description. And what's so smart about the Michael West book is that he points out that Washington, not as a theorist of something called race relations or of Black leadership, but through his actual practice, substantively it invented the notion of race relations. Because what happened was that Black people disappeared, and this was a natural effect of disfranchisement and the expulsion of Black people out of civic life, especially in the South. Black people disappeared as individual citizens, right? And they disappeared as, students, teachers, doctors, lawyers, plumbers, shipbuilders, right? Carpenters, farmers, preachers, anything. And we're all compressed into the racial identity, right? That singular construct of the Negro, right? And the race relations framework took shape as a way to accommodate really Northern liberals more than anybody else to the reality that in the South, the 15th Amendment was a dead letter. The 14th Amendment was basically a dead letter. And the 13th Amendment was an open question, right? And what made it possible to overlook the expulsion of Black citizens from civic and public life in the South was this idea of race relations. Because what happens is that in the race relations framework, the thing that matters is how the races relate, right? And there's no way to know how the races relate unless you got a broker or a mediator fastening the loyalty of the subordinate race to the agendas of the superordinate race, right? And in that framework, then there's only good race relations and bad race relations. And what good race relations meant is that nobody who mattered was complaining, which meant white people weren't complaining. Powerful white people weren't complaining.
There's an important element here that I don't know if it's out of humility or out of I've said it enough. I don't have to. So there's a very important fact that we're missing here that explains why was it necessary. And we did a whole show on this. Why was it necessary for the American ruling class to disenfranchise Black people within 30 years of emancipation, and what caused that to happen? And what that caused that to happen is that Black people and white people were basically engaged in one of the most powerful and most radical labor uprisings, particularly in the South, that had the chance to not only threaten the traditional function of Southern plantation capitalism, but fracture the hegemony of the two-party system.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it could have been. I mean, it's easy to exaggerate the extent of the threat, right? I mean, for a long time, for instance, I thought that that the ruling class was crazy, right? Because the threat couldn't have been that great, but in fact it was, right? And it's one of those cases where, well, I think I said this. I don't know if I said this in that article or someplace else, but if we think about how people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk they respond to the demand that they pay taxes, right? And they treat that like it's a threat to put them under a forced march to Treblinka. But it helps to sense a little bit that how powerful people with absolute power feel any challenge to the absoluteness of their power as though it's like a cannibalistic uprising. But it's certainly the case that, so a populist Republican fusion government won statewide in North Carolina in 1894 and was reelected again by an even wider margin in 1896. So the readjustment movement took power in Virginia in 1879, and less dramatically along the way, from the time that blacks had been enfranchised at the state and local level, alliances of black and white, working class people, challenged more or less successfully, or with varying degrees of success, planter, merchant, capitalist class power, and success in putting down the populist uprising, right, just basically gave the ruling class to liquidate it all, right, and to impose under the framework of white supremacy to impose their absolute dominance, right, over the politics and social life of the region.
Super chat here.
Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe on your way out. You can catch the live stream of This is Revolution every Tuesday through Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time and Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. This is Revolution.